More fallout from Jack Del Rio's comments during the week, observations from the defensive side of the ball following Wednesday's OTA practice, and a snag in the new stadium plans for the Washington Commanders. Buckle up. It's time for the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And we thank you for making us your first listen or your first view every single day. I am David Harrison, covering the Commanders for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. My co-host, Chris Russell, the Rooster, one half of the Russell and Medhurst show on the Team 980. Find Chris and Pete Medhurst there Monday through Friday from 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern or anytime along with this show on the Odyssey app. When we're not there or here, we're on Twitter at DHarrison82, at WrestleMania621, and at LO Commanders.
Yeah, and absolutely, David. We thank you again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen or for your first view if you're watching on YouTube. Today's episode brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Commanders listeners get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings. Use code Locked On at checkout. All right, David, are you ready? Buckle up because, well, we have issues. Houston, hello, we have a problem. Since we left you, Jack Del Rio has apologized for his dust-up comments that we addressed at the in the final segment of our last episode when we were live at the Inova Sports Performance Center in Ashburn on Wednesday afternoon. So as we pretty much thought, he was going to have to address it. He was going to have to apologize to some degree. So here's what he said, quote, "I made comments earlier today," meaning Wednesday, in referencing the attack that took place on the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. Referencing that situation as a dust-up was irresponsible and negligent, and I am sorry. I stand by my comments condemning violence in communities across the country. I say that while also expressing my support as an American citizen for peaceful protest in our country. I have fully supported all peaceful protests in America. I love, respect, and support all of my fellow coaches, players, and staff that I work with and respect their views and opinions." David, your reaction to Jack Del Rio?
Yeah, it means that somebody said something. Let's just be clear about it. That's from the outside looking in, and I know I'm not the only one who believes that. Like, Jack said what he said, at the microphone, during the media session to everybody standing there. As soon as we talked about it. As soon as he said the words "dust up," you could feel it. I would say the air left the room, but we weren't in the room. But still, the air left the area. Yes. You could just feel the reaction, and it's not even necessarily that everybody there was necessarily mad about it. I think we all just kind of understood from a media and a societal standpoint, what you just said is not going to go down well. You're going to get blowback from it, and really, we kind of talked about this offline, but the only way that, the team might make a statement, all these things, but the only way Jack himself was going to come out and do kind of one of these apologies would be basically if someone inside the organization or a conglomerate maybe of people got to him and kind of said, "Look, dude, you need to undo that as best as you can." I'm not the only one who noticed what he put out there on Twitter was in quotations. That's kind of weird. I've never typed a statement on my own and put it in quotation marks. You know what I mean? And I kind of go back to the Friends episode of "I'm sorry," meaning you're not really sorry. And again, I don't know. You don't want to read too much into that, but I just kind of thought of it as a weird, one more weird characteristic of this already weird situation.
Well, to your point, everything about this is weird, strange, confusing. And in some ways, quite honestly, disheartening. Jack Del Rio, in my opinion, the comments were ignorant. And I'll just say this. A lot of people are asking whether he should be fired, suspended. Look, I personally don't think he should be fired. I'll offer that opinion. Could I see a suspension? I guess. But one person that does is NAACP president Derek Johnson. So this story came out mid-Thursday afternoon, well after Jack's apology, and President Johnson, again, of the NAACP said, quote, downplaying the insurrection by comparing it to nationwide protests, which were in response to a public lynching, is twisted. You can't coach a majority black team while turning your back on the black community. It's time for you to pack up and step off the field.
Yeah.
Well, David, that puts things in a completely different context because, again, President Johnson is not only talking about his role as the president of the NAACP, but he's saying you're coaching a majority African-American black team.
Yeah. I mean, again, Jack is entitled to his opinion, right? Like the part of what he said yesterday, not even necessarily in that end part, but like earlier in the press session, the media session, that I agree with is that he's American. He has the right to have his opinion. He has the right to voice his opinion. But I mentioned this on our live episode or on Wednesday. You don't have the right to be free of reaction, though, right? And when people react, and if you want to have a respectful discourse, when people react, you have to absorb that reaction and then formulate some sort of response again to that reaction. Now, if people are just straight up being, disrespectful, disgusting, calling you name, like we deal with that, Chris. Like if someone comes on me at Twitter and is like, hey, I don't like what you said about Carson Wentz because of A, B, C, and D, we can have a conversation. But if you go, hey, you're an idiot and wrong about Carson Wentz, I can't believe you get paid to do this. Awesome. The mute button is free. You know what I mean? Like it's really that easy. But there are plenty of people who are upset about what Jack has said or is saying that are responding to him in a respectful manner, and he's not interacting with them. And again, that's his choice as well. But what really, honestly, like at the core of this whole thing for me, if you're Jack Del Rio, you have to understand your role. And we go back to like the Charles Barkley, I'm not a role model and all this stuff. Listen, you do this job voluntarily. Jack Del Rio has been in this business long enough. This whole like coaches and players being members of society and influencers in society, this isn't new. Like this didn't just happen in 2022. When you're Jack Del Rio and you tweet something or you put something out like a message like this, you know what you're doing. You know the influence that you have and the reactions you can draw from people. You have to be more aware of what you're doing. Now, if he doesn't care about, the fact that now his head coach is going to get asked questions about this nonstop, Kendall Fuller got asked questions. Kendall Fuller didn't even know what the tweets were yet, and he's getting asked about it instead of getting asked about practice. Carson Wentz is getting asked about it and having just heard about the situation, and then obviously there's something going on inside the building that sparks this apology. Like now the team is focusing on these things, and yeah, people can say, well, that's because the media, you're focusing on them. Well, listen, these are all societal topics, and as journalists, as media members, our job is to cover the team specifically, but also how the team interacts with society. And these things are going on in our society. So it's not our job necessarily I'm not going to wag my finger at Jack and say, no, you shouldn't say it. But you have to understand who you are as an organizational leader and make those decisions based off of what's best for your organization. Me personally, this is not that. If Jack disagrees, well, Jack's got that job. I don't. So that's between him and his bosses. But I think from the fact that an apology was issued later tells us that someone in the organization sees it the way that I'm seeing it.
Yeah, no doubt. And I don't think that, to summarize, I don't think that apology came directly from Jack. I think it was requested, ordered, pushed, whatever. And also maybe even co-written, I don't know, or approved, something like that. Just
call them ghostwriters, Chris.
Yeah. You mentioned Kendall Fuller. He said, just a short, quick quote. He said, I don't have a reaction right now. This was just right after Jack had. He said, if I have a reaction or feeling towards something, I'll express that with him. Jonathan Allen told NBC Sports Washington, that he doesn't care what his defensive coordinator really says on Twitter or thinks. He says, as long as he shows up every day and works hard, that's what I want from my defensive coordinator, which is kind of the response you would expect from a Jonathan Allen. One former player of Jack Del Rio, Shelby Harris, who is a member of the Broncos, he had a series of eye-opening tweets. I guess he's deleted a few of them, but the money quote that I saw on one of the tweets was, quote, I just know I couldn't play for him, meaning, at the end. And he also said, this was not surprising to him. And I'm paraphrasing on that. And then D'Angelo Hall, the former Washington corner and now former broadcaster, tweeted a clown emoji in response to one of JDR's tweets. So the reaction, David, has come in fast and furious. And listen, I'll just wrap this up on my end by saying this story is not going away for everybody that wants. Come Tuesday, when we're both back in Ashburn, Ron Rivera is going to get blitzed with all sorts of questions about this.
He hasn't been asked about this yet. Or he has been asked. He has been asked about the aftermath, and he hasn't really dove into it as much. And he's gonna, it's gonna be harder for him to kind of avoid that. Look, for what it's worth, I guess I pretty much agree with Jonathan Allen. Like, that's kind of my professional stance in organizations that I've been in. I'm not really too concerned with whether or not our opinions on society and things going on in the country align, as long as we can come together and do our jobs. That's really where my focus is. But there's a lot of personalities in that locker room. And again, we got a voicemail from Phil in Atlanta, who kind of called in and talked about just kind of understanding who you are and understanding what the image or what the message does. And again, to me, that's to me where Jack Del Rio went off. Like, you're a private citizen, you're an American, you have the right to do that. Yes, you do. But you also have to understand, in a profession, your off-time conduct is attached to your professional status, whether you like it or not. That's just the facts of the matter. And to me, this isn't the best way to necessarily go about handling your off-time business, understanding that it ties to your professional status. But, again, that's Jack's decision to make.
No doubt about it. All right, coming up, we will get away from this Jack Del Rio situation and chaos, and we will give you a couple of our takeaways, especially on the defensive side of the ball, from Commanders OTAs as we look ahead to veteran minicamp. That's next, right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast. But first, we tell you about our friends at betonline.net. You, of course, your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. You find out all of the latest sports developments, news, odds. Do they have odds on when Jack Del Rio is going to put his foot in his mouth again? I don't know, but go check it out at BetOnline. They might have a prop for you. Or you might want to just follow them for basketball championship odds and props, the NHL hockey conference finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, the latest fighting news from MMA, UFC, and boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the site today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and all the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Locked On Commanders listeners, we have an important favor to ask of you. We put together a survey so we can learn more about listeners like yourself, and you can make your favorite Locked On podcasts even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like, what you don't like about Locked On Podcasts as a company. Go to podcast.com/A right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes a survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. We thank you for your help. All right, David, right back into it. Our thoughts on what we saw on the field. Yes, we actually get to sometimes, a little bit, talk about football here, or foosball, depending on which way you want to phrase it. Yeah, actually, there was a practice. There were things actually done on the field. And I guess, when we start and we look at what we saw, you jumped out. You noticed. I didn't notice this as much, so I'm going to set you up here. A very important rookie from last year seems to be making a little bit of progress.
Yeah, I mean, how much progress he's making is from an execution and production standpoint is obviously still something we'll have to see as we move forward. But we mentioned last week, Jamin Davis. It looks right that he was basically splitting first team reps with David Mayo and splitting second team reps with David Mayo, and to me that stood out because in week 1 it was all Jamin with the first team. Week 2, again there's that split, and then this week I wanted to see, is there going to be a split again, or is it going to go back to kind of status quo? Jamin Davis was playing with the first team. David Mayo was back with the second team. Now, again, it's OTAs, it's experiment time. It's let's see who fits where and who fits, does what best. There could be a reason that Jack Del Rio or whoever made the decision to split Mayo and Davis between the first, second teams last week, why they did that other than that. So everything is grain of salt time, right? But I think it is significant to see Jamin getting the majority of the reps with the first team. It shows that, at least up to right now, heading into minicamp, it looks like he is, penciled in again as the starter next to Cole Holcomb. And again, coming into the minicamp where we get to see them for consecutive days for the first time in this offseason process will kind of give us a little bit more of a hint or insight into what's going on there.
Yeah. One thing I was wondering about, we mentioned and talked about the Jeremy Reeves hit on De'Ami Brown and Ron Rivera's reaction. And I kind of wondered initially, does that further open the door for a guy like Derek Forrest to take on a bigger role at safety? He's going to make the team. He started off the year last year on IR, he's a special teams kid, what have you. He's going to play multiple roles, but will he get more looks at safety? And I think the answer for me right now is yes. And he broke up a pass from Carson Wentz, which led directly to a Cole Holcomb interception on Wednesday. I don't want to make too big of a deal out of it, but now in year 2, greater understanding, again, more experience, more seasoning. Again, he started off last year hurt, which kind of put him behind. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the safety position, what do you have? Right now, you have rookie Percy Butler, you have Cam Curl, you have Bobby McCain, and then basically you have those two guys, meaning Jeremy Reeves and Derek Forrest, unless I'm forgetting about somebody right off the top of my head. I kind of think right now, as we look at it, and again, this is right now, Derek Forrest is that number 4 guy. Now, Troy Apke, we've seen him at safety. So, I mean, I guess you would still kind of sort of include him in that group. But, I mean, I clearly think Forrest is ahead of Apke, and I think probably he's more ahead of Reeves maybe than we thought, or at least I thought. And the hit, the incident, the interception, all of that we saw on Wednesday, David, I don't think that hurts Defo, as Jack Del Rio called him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And listen, Derek Forrest, he appears to me right now to be reacting and playing a little bit faster with a little bit more confidence, I think, than the last time we saw him. So that obviously speaks well for him. And you mentioned that play. Look, that play again, I mean, obviously the ball was intended for a receiver, but what Derek was able to do was play aggressive, come downhill, attack the ball where it was going to meet the receiver, make a play without making unnecessary contact to the receiver, showing that kind of football IQ, the on-field awareness of where you are, spatial recognition, and ability to make a play. And then, it landed in the hands of Cole Holcomb. That's, to me, like that shows several different layers of things as far as how the player is reading things, how he's seeing things, how he's reacting, and the intelligence level. So, yeah, Derek Forrest, I think, obviously, we're not really doing winners and losers from OTAs because, again, everything is kind of sanitized right now. But if you had to name a winner, I think Derek Forrest certainly comes out as a winner. We've been seeing him take plenty of first-team reps kind of in that Buffalo nickel kind of a rotational situation. My second takeaway from the defense here in this final OTA practice that we saw them isn't so much of a take and more so kind of a question, because Phildarian Mathis has been doing really, really well playing next to Jonathan Allen with the first team in the team drills. He's looked really comfortable. Like, he doesn't stand out as a rookie, as the new guy. He's getting some penetration. He's pushing some guys back. He's getting in between some gaps. And we've seen this first team defense, they've the offense has gotten their plays as well, but we've seen this first team defense make some plays against that first team offense with, minimal contact and all those things. I just kind of wonder, like with the whole Daron Payne situation, like I get why Daron is doing what he's doing. I don't necessarily disagree with him, but I just kind of wonder when the mini camp comes around and now Daron is expected to be on the field, for the mandatory part of this camp. What is he going to do? Because if he hold now, it would be a holdout, right? It's not a holdout in OTAs. It's just he's not volunteering to do voluntary workouts. Now it's a holdout. If Daron goes that route, Phildarian Mathis continues to gain ground, continues to impress people, continues to show coaches he can do this job. I kind of just wonder, and even if Daron comes out, or not plays, but goes through the drills, I'm interested. I want to see, like, is Phildarian on the field a little bit? Is Daron, even when he's participating, is he standing on the sideline sometimes? It's going to be an interesting thing to watch for me next week.
Yeah. I don't know what the line of delineation is going to be from OTAs to mandatory minicamp in terms, Daron's been there, as we've discussed. He's participated in everything but team drills. So I don't know if that changes. I don't know what the requirement, again, line in the sand, if you will, is. I'll let somebody smarter than me figure that out. But to your point, Phildarian Mathis is definitely making an impact. He's definitely showing the coaches, hey, this is what I've got. This is what I offer. This is what I show. And listen, I already thought he was going to have a large role in this defense after losing Matt Ioannidis, after losing Tim Settle, and being drafted in the second round. I think he's just only shown, hey, you know what? When we go to that 5-man bear front, that's me. That's not Daniel Wise. That's not James Smith-Williams. That's me. And, oh, by the way, I could also be a starter if I'm actually better or more consistent than Daron Payne. Or he's not going to climb over Jonathan Allen, obviously, but you plant that seed in the mind. If Daron Payne gets maybe off to a slow start or whatever, something can happen there. And just wrapping up again, a couple of our conversations here and takeaways. It looked like the defense to me, Dave, maybe I saw the wrong thing, struggled a little bit in the red zone team drills that Washington ran. The offense was running a lot of backdoor flips and quarterback pulls and RPOs and different types of looks, different types of things that you see a lot in the NFL in the red zone. And it looked like they were struggling a little bit with some of the motion and the movement and some of the trickeration, if you will, or the different looks. But remember, there was no Montez Sweat, there was no Daron Payne, there was no Chase Young, so probably not a major deal.
Yeah, but I mean, look, it's there. You know what I mean? So it's something worth watching for. I mean, we saw, and this wasn't red zone specifically, but we did see Jahan Dotson get free on a wheel route. Defense completely just lost him, completely lost him. It was very impressive. Like, we made the joke on the sideline that we could have made that throw. Now, Jahan, if I made that throw, Jahan's not going to catch and be able to run. The defender's probably going to get there right when the ball does. But but there was another play I pointed out to you, right, where they ran another kind of motion wheel route with Jahan, and he was left all alone. Now, on that rep, Carson was naturally by progression looking the other way and made a throw the other direction. So, that didn't end up hurting the defense of that rep. But that's something, that we got to keep watching for here as we get to the mandatory minicamp next week back out in Ashburn, Virginia at the Nova Sports Performance Center. Locked On Commanders going to be on ground. Chris Russell, Russell and Medhurst will be on ground. SI Fan Nation will be on ground as we cover all those bases, everything Washington Commanders. Speaking of, are the Washington Commanders going to call the Commonwealth of Virginia home? It kind of seemed like it was pretty likely early on. Now it's hit a snag, and it might be damaging a little bit of those possibilities. We'll talk about that coming up next year on the Locked On Commanders podcast. All right, guys, final segment here, Locked On Commanders, final episode of the week. We thank you for joining us and checking us out as always. Commander Stadium plans. Chris, it has been one heck of a 90 days or so. We went from $1 billion from the Commonwealth of Virginia to get the Commanders to move in and play and call Virginia home. And then it kind of went down to like, well, maybe $350 million to kind of like match what Maryland is doing. And now basically nothing. The Commander Stadium proposal bill in the Commonwealth of Virginia is basically dead for right now. There will not be a vote anytime soon that we're aware of. The team has acknowledged, though, that they will continue to explore options in Virginia.
Right. And the Washington Post did some reporting on this. So did Michael Phillips of the Richmond Times-Dispatch, basically saying, the state legislator who kind of led the charge to lure the Commanders originally to Virginia, basically waved the white flag on Thursdays, just saying there's too much to overcome. And also, and that was in reference to Dan Snyder, traffic, congestion, financing, all of that. But Richard Saslaw, a Democrat from Fairfax County, said also, David, what we were talking about, that comments from Commanders defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio, while it didn't make the decision, it was, in his words, quote, the last straw for the stadium bill. Now, the team issued a statement in response to that, saying that they appreciate the time and the effort of the leaders of the Virginia General Assembly, and that they will continue to work on the complexity of the endeavor, is what they call it, showing remarkable economic development opportunity and job growth and so on and so forth, that they look forward to continuing the open dialogue and trying to work out something with Virginia. Now, the only thing I would say is, because of the timeline of this, it's accelerated, right? They're so behind right now in terms of getting shovels in dirt. They may just give up and go to Maryland, where they already own the land and they know they're not getting stadium help. And they also know now that they're not getting the RFK Stadium site.
Yeah, I mean, the RFK Stadium site has long been desired by people. Fans want to see them go back there. Some media members want to see them go back there. Basically not happening, according to several politicians who wrote a rather blunt letter recently saying specifically that this isn't going to happen. A majority of DC council members said Thursday they don't support the construction of a new Washington Commanders site or a stadium at the RFK site. So, I mean, it's pretty much what we've been saying already, that DC was just not going to be a thing. but now it's a kind of officially official.
Right. This basically, it was a strongly worded letter that we all kind of came to on Thursday from Ward 6 council member in D.C., Charles Allen, who wrote it in direct, address to Senator Eleanor Holmes Norton, who is a major shaker, obviously, and a Congresswoman, I'm sorry, Norton, not Senator, I should say, and said, that he led a majority of the council in thanking and supporting her for her work to bring the RFK site to the district control, meaning from the federal government-owned land, but that they spoke unequivocally that they will not support an NFL stadium as part of the future on the RFK campus. He said, and ended the note, quote, "The debate is done." So for anybody that was hoping that there was like still a last, you never say never, David. You never say never. But I've never felt that they were going to be able to go back to RFK for many, many logistical problems.
Right.
But this pretty much closed the damn door.
Yeah, and let's be honest. The team isn't giving them any reason to back off that stance. You know what I mean? And look, I think there are economical impacts, factors here as well that go beyond winning and losing and go beyond they go beyond the image of the team as well. The NFL is king in America. That's the bottom line. And so everywhere you go, if you are part of the NFL, you still wear a crown, even if your crown shines a little bit less brighter or sparkles a little bit less in the sunlight than somebody else's does. So if this stadium complex, Commander City, gets built in Maryland, at the RFK site or in Virginia, it's going to provide an economic boom. There's going to be thousands and thousands of jobs created locally for this and bring traffic and tourism and all this other stuff. And then you have the other shopping centers that they plan with this whole thing. So there is a reason to put the stadium anywhere outside of just winning or losing. But it's really hard to get the public behind you. And that's what we're talking about, is getting public money support behind this thing when you have all these things coming back. And again, just kind of tie the whole episode together. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about Jack Del Rio understanding his role as an organizational leader with this team and with what's going on. Like, Jack didn't do most of the stuff that's led to this white hot microscope being put on this team. And that's fine, but you don't have to contribute to it. You know what I mean? And you can have all the beliefs in the world that you want, but there is something that I learned very, very young in my life that I think kind of applies here, is just because you can't say something doesn't mean you should say something. And this is one of those situations, I think, that Jack has the freedom, again, to say it. Nobody's trying to take that away from him, but don't think it was necessarily the best idea.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I'll just add a finishing touch. Look, do I think Jack Del Rio's comments caused all these stadium bills and projects to kind of, be pushed aside? No, I honestly don't think that. But you know what? It's a strong political stance and gain potentially when you can use that as another reason why we're not going to provide the funding and the resource and the support. And right now, the organization is fighting so many brush fires and so many uphill climbs that I just don't see how they get it done, with the exception of, remember, they own the land in Maryland, near FedEx Field, and they already know that they're not getting financing to help them build the stadium. So now it just becomes, can they privately finance 100% of what is expected to be about a $1.5 billion stadium, and maybe more depending on what else they do to it. All right, more.
You know who could do that, Chris?
Yep.
You know who could do that? Who could privately fund it? Jeff
Mr.
Bezos.
Amazon. Who's that?
Jeff Bezos.
Well, yeah. I guess he's still technically Mr. Amazon, even though he's like retiring or whatever he's doing. He can do a lot of things. He can also buy the Washington Commanders organization for about $5 billion after the Broncos were sold for $4.6+ billion earlier this week. All right. Thanks again, Commanders fans, for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and your first view of the day. Now make your second listen and view the Locked On NFL podcast. Our NFL national experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from around the league, because an offseason doesn't equal a break in the action. Oh, don't we know? Follow Locked On NFL. every day on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. David and I will be back after the weekend. Again, remember, we're doing a little bit of a reduced schedule. We will be here for you to cover everything we can, and we will have boots on the ground for mandatory minicamp in Ashburn next week. If you want to hop in, 301-615-3577 or locked on Washington Commanders at gmail.com. For my partner, David Harrison, who's covering the Washington Commanders for SI.com's Fan Nation. I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst Show on the Team 980. If you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, and thank you for joining us right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.